up here, and he can share with you, in his own words, exactly what inspired him to write his book. And he had a little speech also that he kind of wanted to give for Black history.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we hope that everyone is enjoying their time tonight with their friends and family. As it was just mentioned, we chose to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. this year. We felt like this was most appropriate because less than a year from now will mark the 50th anniversary since his assassination. When I was invited to say a few words about Dr. King, initially I was reluctant to do so because I didn't know what more could be said about a man of his stature. In grade school, many of us learned about his activism, his pursuit to eradicate open racism, and his ability to mobilize a nation toward a future in which equality became an inherent right for all of its citizens. We are well aware of his infectious charisma and his unrivaled oratory skills that captivated audiences wherever he went. We already know of his principled stance to counter violence with nonviolence as he led the nation into a new era. So what more could I say? So instead of trying to add to an already perfect resume, I thought that I would simply illustrate why I think Dr. King was an extraordinary man. In 1963, Dr. King traveled from his hometown of Atlanta, Georgia to Birmingham, Alabama to lead marches against the injustices that afflicted that community. Shortly after his arrival, he was arrested and jailed under the pretense of not obtaining the proper permits to do so. While he sat in jail, he read a published letter in a local newspaper that had been addressed to him by 8 clergymen from the Birmingham community. These men excoriated Dr. King for coming into their community, which, according to them, did not need him. They couldn't understand why a preacher from Atlanta would make it his business to meddle in the affairs of another state. So in his rebuttal, which later became an historical document known as Letter from a Birmingham Jail, Dr. King was unapologetic when he stated, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," end quote. You see, Dr. King saw no difference in the injustices that afflicted African Americans in Atlanta and those that impacted the residents of Birmingham. He made no distinction between the disenfranchisement of African Americans in Atlanta or Detroit or Chicago and the discrimination in employment, housing, and education of those in Jackson, Mississippi, Cleveland, Ohio, and yes, even Portland, Oregon. He keenly understood that if left unchecked and unchallenged, discrimination was like a cancer that would grow, rapidly spread, and choke out the life of its inhabitants. So despite the personal and political ramifications, Dr. King remained undeterred in his pursuit to bring about equal protection under the law for African Americans. This eventually culminated with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, followed by the Voting Rights Act of '65. His heroic efforts, however, also placed a larger target on his back. And sadly, as we know, just 3 years later, he was fatally struck by an assassin's bullet as he stood on the balcony of a motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 39. So as this 50th anniversary approaches, there will undoubtedly be countless hours of coverage of his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, where he laid out a utopian vision of America that actually lived up to his creed that all men are created equal. You will see many historians speak to the attributes that are so often ascribed to him. But what will likely be much less talked about, if at all, is the driving force behind his activism: love. Dr. King possessed a love for mankind that surpasses most. It transcended race, religion, and any other way that we look to divide ourselves. He operated from a worldview that enabled him to both appreciate the value in diversity while taking every opportunity he could to underscore the common thread that binds us all together: humanity. This immeasurable love is what compelled him to be the voice for the voiceless, to fight violence with nonviolence, to counter injustice with morality, and to ultimately sacrifice his life for the cause of a greater America, a more unified America. And if we think that Dr. King's mission to bring about a better future for people of color was by challenging the status quo of an oppressive system, we would only be scratching the surface. He wasn't merely fighting a system of racism, bigotry, and intolerance, but rather the mentality behind it. A mentality that, quite frankly, so many of us use today. When we encircle ourselves only with people who look like us, talk like us, and dress like us, while stereotyping, disparaging, and looking down upon those who don't. It is a mentality that allows us to turn on the television and not be outraged or even remotely upset when we see countless lives destroyed in communities that have been ravaged by gang violence, simply because the occupants of those communities don't shop at the same stores as us or send their kids to the same schools as ours. It is a mindset that essentially says we are us and they are them. This is what Dr. King fought against. This is what he gave his life for. And as much as we will hail his courage to fight against an oppressive system with the tactic of nonviolence, this was not his primary weapon to do so. It was love. And this is what I would have you all remember most about Dr. King. Enjoy the rest of your evening.